Sunday Surefire Podcast. I'm your host, the Commish. Joining me tonight is the co-host, Aaron Downtown Brown.
Hey, hey.
Aaron, what's going on, brother?
Oh, not much. Another fun off-season week. I think I might start keeping a journal, trying to keep track of all these transactions around the league. I don't know about you.
Yeah, you're gonna have to. I mean, the this week every year is always a frenzy. Players changing teams and just making for a really fun couple of weeks, really, to kind of keep track of all this player movement and kind of analyzing how that player movement is affecting the fantasy world. So that's definitely what we're going to be doing here tonight. We're coming at you with the second consecutive week of free agency discussion. Last week we were really heavy on the running backs. We're gonna touch more so on the wide receivers tonight, a little bit at tight end, and just a couple minor, I guess you could say, sort of, somewhat minor QB moves over the last couple days as well. So we'll touch on all that, and we'll just dive right into it here. We'll get started at those quarterback positions that I mentioned. And the first move here, probably a predictable starting point, is Justin Fields being traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a 2025 sixth round draft pick. There's some conditions attached to that. If Fields plays 51% or more of the snaps, it could go up to a fourth round pick. But ultimately, kind of just moving on from Justin Fields here. The writing was on the wall with him in Chicago when the team ended up with the number one pick in the draft. So it looks like they're going to be moving ahead with Caleb Williams in Chicago. But let's talk about Justin Fields in Pittsburgh, Aaron. What do you make of this move?
I guess like always, two sides of the coin. I think as far as like a football move, obviously, not a Steelers fan, but I guess just in like retrospect, if you have Russell Wilson as your starter and Fields as a backup, it's pretty decent quarterback depth, I guess you could argue around the league. And then when you throw in, they're only going to be paying him $4.5 million with an option to keep Fields in his fifth year. I think it's a good football move, but we are a dynasty show or a fantasy show. So in regards to fantasy, it kind of sucks. I think I definitely is bad for fantasy. I mean, Fields was a nice fantasy tool to have on your team, right? Where maybe kind of fighting that conversation where, okay, is he a good NFL quarterback? But a lot of us fantasy managers, we say who cares when they still put up the rushing numbers, kind of the Konami code quarterback, as you bring up many times too. So I think bad for fantasy. I think for dynasty, if you have Fields, I guess at this point he's kind of a hold because his value went down, and maybe if you're like a rebuilding team and kind of try to look for the future again with him, maybe he needs that. Maybe you're to sit behind Wilson, but yeah, I guess that's kind of my 2 cents on him. Bad for fantasy, good for football. Maybe hold if you're a dynasty owner. What do you think, Kamish?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a good fantasy sign, or sorry, a good real football signing, I should say, for the reasons you mentioned. I think with all the quarterback injuries that piled up in the last couple seasons, teams are starting to put more of an emphasis on their backup quarterback position, just making sure that they have a guy who can come in and at least run the offense in a competent manner that gives your team a chance in the event that your starting quarterback goes down. So I like the signing as well on that lens. Obviously, for fantasy, if the guy's not starting games, he's not doing you any favors. So he's going to be probably off the radar in redraft leagues. And in Dynasty, he's definitely a hold candidate. I mean, you're not going to get much more than likely a third round pick for him in Superflex leagues. So I would definitely advise holding on to him for now because he's so young. And when I think Justin Fields, I think about a guy who he showed some things as a starter. I know they didn't win a ton of games, but he was dropped into an incredibly difficult situation. He was the quarterback 3 years ago that they picked to rebuild around. So he joined a bad team and didn't really get a great opportunity. He didn't really get weapons either until last season when they brought in DJ Moore and then Fields had injuries of his own. I mean, the story is kind of well known, but I just think that there will be a day where Fields gets back on the field, and I want him on my dynasty roster when that happens. So I'm definitely not going to panic sell him right now. What I do think about this Pittsburgh situation as a whole is that I think what Russell Wilson signing there, I mean, he wouldn't have gone anywhere where he wasn't going to be guaranteed to get the first crack at starting, I don't think. So he'll be the guy, but I mean, if you look at Russ the last couple of years, I mean, he's really fallen hard. So I could see a scenario where if the season doesn't get off great for the Steelers, at least on the offensive side, that maybe they do look to move on from Russ and give Fields an opportunity to play. We saw Mike Tomlin roll with Pickett over Trubisky in 2022, and then he replaced Pickett with Mason Rudolph down the stretch last year. I know Pickett was hurt for a portion of that time, but Rudolph gave the team the best chance to win, and Tomlin pulled the trigger. So with Russ on a being paid really nothing by the Steelers, I could see him yielding the job to Fields as early as this season if things don't shake out well for the team in the early going here. So any last thoughts on Fields before we move on to our next QB?
Yeah, no, I think Fields definitely has a talent. I think he's always been a talented quarterback, and I think he's been plagued with like two sides of the Chicago Bears story the last two seasons where they start off horrible and they still lose games, but then they start looking like a team at some point, right? And then by the time they start actually putting together, better drives or then their defense kind of turned around last year, then they're kind of out of the picture, right? And that's actually when Fields started playing well again. So I think and then in the 2022 season, he kind of just turned on the Jets and highlight shows and whatnot. So yeah, it'd be interesting, like, if he can just take, whenever he gets that opportunity, if he can just start off strong, from that opportunity. And yeah, maybe you just need a, fresh new look, with the new team. But, yeah, I agree with you. I think he'll get a shot again. I think, as you said, just teams trying to build that quarterback depth. He'll definitely get some reps. Week one, no, I agree. That's still going to be Wilson's job to take. But yeah, I guess that's just my. Couldn't agree more with you there.
Yeah, good. I mean, I think I just think in closing here with Fields that his story is not yet written at the NFL level, and he's going to get another opportunity. And I think sooner rather than later, even if it's not right out of the gate to start the 2024 season. But let's talk about one more quarterback that is changing teams for 2024, and that's Sam Howell being traded to the Seahawks, along with a fourth and sixth round draft pick for a third and fifth round pick coming back. So just a couple of pick swaps there in the middle and late rounds of the draft for Sam Howell. Howell himself had an up and down season in 2023. He had 3,946 passing yards and 26 total touchdowns between passing and rushing, and he did look good at times. He led the offense as best he could for a young player coming in there on a tough team. But there was also some low lights as well. He led the league in sacks taken and interceptions thrown. So two categories you definitely don't want to be having on your resume as a quarterback. Like I said, the Washington team didn't really do their part around him, and they're drafting number 2 overall for a reason. And once Washington got that pick, we knew his chances of starting in 2024 were a long shot at best. So sure enough, he gets to move over to Seattle. And I look at this as not really necessarily the worst thing in the world for Sam Howell. He's going to get a chance to sit out of the gate here behind Geno Smith and learn behind a veteran quarterback, which is good. But I do wonder for how long he's going to sit behind Geno Smith. And Smith, he's enjoyed a career resurgence out of nowhere in the last couple of years, but he's a guy that I think with the new regime taking over, at least the new coaching staff coming into place there, that um, if Geno gets off to a slow start, maybe they want to see what they have in a young player in Sam Howell. So like I think Smith kind of gives them that higher floor for now, but Howell's got more upside. So it wouldn't shock me at all if the Seahawks don't get off to a fast start, that Sam Howell might be even starting games for them as early as 2024.
Yeah, I agree with you here too. As well, right? It's almost like a repeat conversation with the Fields conversation where you got another young quarterback and it's funny. We kind of left it with Fields saying, "Hey, he's still got more gas in the tank." And with Gino, if you remember, he started off pretty quiet. He's kind of a high prospect out of college. Trying. I guess he was presumed to be like the first or second pick in his draft, and really didn't pan out till in recent years, right? So I think with how I think kind of breathing down his throat. I think, as you said, as a new regime in Seattle, may give Hal the opportunity again to be a starter again. I think a lot of teams were surprised with Washington. They start off pretty strong in the first half of the year. Their points per game was up there. They couldn't hold it together all year round, but definitely made defenses think twice, right? Like he showed as athletic ability. He also was able to just like move the ball down the field and be patient too. So he showed poise, he showed his athleticism. So once again, I think you're right in the fact where Howell may get another shot. And with Gino's potential last year coming in 2024 on contract with Seattle, they may pull that trigger in 2024, as you said. So again, we're in agreement again now with Hal here.
Well, look at that, and I agree. It is kind of similar shades of the Fields conversation where the young guy with upside sits to start the year and then maybe takes over for the veteran later on. But that's all depending on how the season goes. Overall, these are not guys you're going to be starting right out of the gate, certainly in the 2024 season. But they're guys you wanted to monitor, particularly in dynasty leagues, particularly in superflex formats where you're just one injury or one underperformance away from having a starter on your hands, and therefore even maybe just having a trade asset on your hands. So you want to make sure you're rostering those guys if you can get them on the cheap. But that's all we got for quarterbacks. We're going to be pretty wide receiver heavy the rest of the way. So we'll just get right to the big fish on the market. That was Calvin Ridley signing a contract with the Tennessee Titans, 4 years, $92 million, with a number of receivers getting franchise tag early in the process, right before free agency started. Ridley kind of became the prize wideout on the market, so he's able to cash it big in Tennessee. So I guess I'll just toss the ball to you, Aaron. Where do you think about this move?
I'm not overly thrilled over it. I guess my head actually kind of went more towards it's kind of a win for Will Levis, right? Like I think as we talk about it sometimes, if you have a young quarterback, you want to throw talent at the wide receiver position, and I think now with Ridley and Hopkins over there for Levis to throw to, and actually Burks as a coming at the slot, may actually work out all right for Levis, right? But as far as like Calvin Ridley, individually for a fantasy season, I think you are gonna probably get up and down weeks. You may have a couple boom weeks where I don't know how much you'll be able to like count on him. And as we know, he's already getting up there in age. He's 29, and I think Commissioner, you're the guru at when the birthdays occur, right? But I don't know if he's gonna hit 30 in the next season or not.
Yeah,
I'll let you.
yeah.
Is
He'll
he
uh, he'll be 30 in
okay?
December of this year.
30 December. Okay, so it's coming. So 30 is coming. But the one odd connection is Titans did hire new offensive coordinator from Jacksonville, right? So maybe that's one little link you can kind of look at where obviously that's where Ridley came from as well. Um, will that play a major role? I don't know, possibly. Um, but I'm not like overly excited about the Ridley signing. I think he probably could have landed on a couple other teams. I would have been happier. But I actually like it better for Will Levis opposed to Calvin Ridley, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does, and I love that take there. That you have a team that, yeah, they're gonna there have a young quarterback, second year guy, Will Levis, and instead of just kind of taking the method that my Patriots are taking and just bringing back all the guys that were part of the lowest scoring offense since 2012 and not adding anything to give an offense that needs a massive talent upgrade, any type of upgrade. Um, the Titans, on the other hand, they're putting their money where their mouth is. With they're spending up on Calvin Ridley. You can argue whether he's worth that contract or not, but ultimately, if you want to get an answer on if your young quarterback can play, you give him weapons and see if he can play. So at least you have the right circumstance in place to find out if the guy that you drafted to be your franchise quarterback can actually live up and be your franchise quarterback. So that's me getting on my soapbox a little bit and knocking my Patriots for being lazy in this free agency and just refusing to spend money. So had to scratch that itch. So I'll do that and say that I like the signing for the Titans, and they actually outbid my Patriots for him. So good for them for doing that. As for fantasy, I'm sort of with you. I don't really love it for Ridley. He is competing with obviously DeAndre Hopkins. The team signed Tony Pollard too to play alongside Tajay Spears. So they're going to want to run the ball. But I mean, Ridley or Levis rather does have that ability to throw the ball down the field. So I think it could be a case where Ridley is definitely fantasy viable. Maybe he just doesn't live up to that ridiculous year he had in 2021 in 2020 when he was a second team All Pro player. But no, overall, Ridley's journey has been kind of a crazy one. He has that All Pro finish on his resume, then obviously the suspension, for the gambling incident, and then he missed a big chunk of 2021 with mental health issues. So a lot going on, but he did bounce back. He was pretty good last year. He was WR 17 overall and WR 26 in on a points per game basis. Did crack the 1,000 yard mark. Did score 8 times. So it's kind of up in the air. So, but he is 30. So as far as a dynasty asset's concerned, I think the landing spot has to downgrade him somewhat. And just with a target for competitions, he's 30 years old now, so he no longer fits on rebuilding teams. So he really should be kind of viewed, I think, as a flex play for contending rosters only in 2024, maybe into 2025 too. So I think we're both pretty much in lockstep on Ridley too. So we'll just keep chugging along here. We'll get to Keenan Allen. This was not a free agent signing, but it was a player movement thing going on. So with the trade to the Bears, he gets dealt to Chicago for a 4th round draft pick. Really just a move that ends up being a salary dump for a retooling Chargers team around Harbaugh coming in. So I guess what do you think about the grizzled veteran and Keenan Allen playing in the Windy City now, Aaron?
Yeah, I think once again, I think it's just another good example, surrounding, what's pretty much Caleb Williams now, right? With another vet, I think him and Moore make it, a nice tandem, right? Where once again, I think it's just trying to surround your young quarterback with success, right? Proven talent. I think Keenan coming off his best a career year still shows he's got something left in the tank. So I think another one where I think Keenan Allen is fantasy viable again. I think he'll get targets. Um, will he put up like the same numbers he did with Herbert? I guess that's kind of just depends on, will Williams have like a Justin Herbert entrance to the league or like a CJ Stroud? I think it probably depends there. Um, but yeah, I think if you're like in win now mode or kind of looking for I guess just a piece that you're gonna want to start. Keenan may be a safe play. But I think with more there does make it interesting where I think who is at number one now at this point where that may get a little tricky. So I actually think his value actually slightly dips because he's older, and then is he going to be that alpha wide receiver over there in Chicago? I guess that's yet to be determined, but I guess it's not a bad move, right? Where I think we're is as Keenan's getting up there in age as well. I think it definitely shows he's going to put up fantasy numbers. I think he dips slightly though overall in value.
For sure. I mean, it has to be a dip. And you go from catching the ball from Justin Herbert and a pass happy offense to now you're playing with a rookie quarterback. It's likely going to be Caleb Williams. And I think you have to look at that as a downgrade. You talk about the competition there for targets, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, Gerald Everett, etc. in town, but you also made a good point about the rookies, and I'm actually going to expand on that a little bit. Since 2018, only 2 rookie quarterbacks have started at least 13 games and supported a top 24 wide receiver in half point PPR scoring formats. You actually, without knowing it, Aaron, you named the 2 uh, quarterbacks in
Oh,
CJ
looky
Stroud.
there.
Yeah. It was going to be a trivia question, but Aaron answered it before I could get to it. So that's always fun. So yeah, the 2 guys were Herbert and CJ Stroud. They were able to do that as rookies. So I mean, maybe Williams is that good and he can carry that offense, but I think it's a lot to put on a rookie. And Allen's a guy who's going to be 32 years old the next month. Another guy I know his birthday. But he's aging, and rookie quarterbacks don't typically support super highly valuable fantasy production. So like it's kind of a really tight needle to thread in Dynasty where you have an aging player that you don't want to get stuck with that falling knife in Dynasty. You don't want to be the guy that you keep a player too long and he retires on you, or his value goes to complete zero and now he's just a wasted roster spot for you. So you really need to be careful with Allen. But I will say that if you're competitive this season and you play in a league, you maybe got multiple flex spots or maybe 3 wide receiver spots. I think he can give you a little something this year. I do see him as more of maybe like a back end WR2. I think that's a good range for him as an upside for his upside this year, but maybe that's viable in your league. I guess that's league dependent, but I just don't. He's not a player I'm really going to invest much in, and I think I'd have a hard time sending out offers to get him on my team in his current situation. But let's go to another trade. Let's talk about Deontay Johnson, who got moved via trade from the Pittsburgh Steelers He gets traded to the Panthers along with the seventh round draft pick for Donta Jackson, who's a corner, and a sixth rounder coming back. So late pick swap there. Really more of almost more so just a player for player trade, which you don't see a ton of in the NFL. So that was interesting. And he Johnson, you hear he's moving out of Pittsburgh. I'm like, great, that was a bottom five offense last year. That's awesome. Let's get him somewhere good. And he ends up with the Panthers, who were actually a worse offense. They were I referenced my Patriots having the worst offense in a point since 2012 in terms of points scored, and the Panthers were actually tied with them last year in points scored. So definitely not going to a high powered offense by any means, but just kind of got the sense that he wore out his welcome in Pittsburgh and kind of needed a new start. But I can say the Panthers, while they're not great, they are kind of wide receiver needy. They got to give Bryce Young some help there. I mean, they have a 34-year-old Adam Thielen and an unproven guy in Jonathan Mingo, who played a ton of snaps last year but didn't really do anything with them. So those are his main competitors for targets. So I like him walking in there and being the quote unquote alpha in that room, at least from a target standpoint. I think he's going to lead this team in targets as long as he stays healthy. And I also, not for nothing here, Aaron, like, but getting Deontay away from Arthur Smith and the current day version of Russell Wilson is hardly a bad thing in my book. So I overall I actually think this is a tiny little bit of a tick up in value, believe it or not. Not a big needle mover by any means. I think I actually like him a little bit better in Carolina than I did in the black and gold playing catching balls from Russell Wilson here. What are your thoughts on anything I just said or on Deontay in general?
Yeah, it's funny. It's like we're definitely on the same wavelength tonight because that's actually the same take I have. I actually really like this spot for Deontay. I think for a couple of reasons, right? Because I think just scheme fit in, we talk real football and fantasy football. And this is the one time where actually I think they go hand in hand where Deontay is kind of like a PPR machine. He's a very smooth route runner. And Bryce doesn't really excel at deep balls, right? Where honestly I think the only way he can have I guess looking at him right now is if he can just control the ball and kind of be more of a game managing quarterback, and that play style kind of fits with Deontay, right? Like we kind of made fun of him for years, not really finding the end zone too much. Where, um, yeah, I know the 2023 season he kind of broke that habit a little bit, but still. And then if you switch over to the fantasy landscape, I think he fits probably where you envisioned him on your roster construction already, right? Like you probably had him as a flex or second flex. If you're in a PPR league, more than better, right? You probably were already trying to make a decision on Deontay last year, being 26, 27 years old as well. So I don't think he moves from a dynasty landscape, and I think he already fits your team if you have him on your team. And I agree with you. I think it's a slight uptick where if you saw that Thielen was pretty fantasy viable last year as well. So I agree with you. Actually, I actually like this move with Deontay with Carolina. I'm with you.
Agreed. Yeah, Thielen was WR17 last season. Kind of a sneaky good value if you got him late in your drafts, or maybe you got him for like a third round pick in your dynasty league. And I think Deontay can actually be a better version of that, especially with the second year under his belt for Bryce Young in that offense. He's probably going to be a little better than he was last season. So at 28, entering the 24 season, I actually, like I said, I'm moving the needle up a little bit on Deontay Johnson. I think he's going to have a solid season that he can definitely pay off as a flex value for you. But the next guy is someone that I know you're really high on. You love this guy. You've kind of been beating the drum for him for years. Even when he doesn't perform, you still have find a way in your heart to share your love for Gabe Davis, who signed a deal with the Jaguars, three
Woohoo! Let's
years.
go.
Yeah, 3 years, $39 million for Mr. Boomer Bust himself. So I'll just get out of the way here and shut up and let Aaron talk about his favorite wide receiver of all time, who finds his new home in Duval.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, Gabe Davis. I mean, obviously I was kind of looking to see where he was going to wind up. He didn't make his way on the Chiefs, right? Sadly, but I don't think the Jags is that far off, right? Where I think as far as value goes, even though as much as I like Gabe Davis, I don't think I don't think it really changes too much. I think the same view you had of Gabe Davis before, it's probably the same view you have of him now, where I think you can probably see another 7+ touchdown season. I mean, he's always going to be a red zone threat. I mean, PFF rates him as an elite deep route runner. I think his post routes are I think second to none, honestly, with according to PFF. So obviously we know what he can do on that end, right? But I think another interesting part is you look at Zay Jones. I think we're looking at Jacksonville's not. They basically want to save some money, right? He did have 1 year on his contract, but was taking up 24 million of cap space there too. So I think with the loss of Zay Jones, it's just Gabe Davis and Captain Kirk, Christian Kirk over there, and Ingram. So I actually don't mind that tandem, and I guess just overall, um, as much as I would love to keep pumping him up, I don't think his value changes too much. But so if you're a Gabe Davis fan before, you probably still can be. I'll at least say. But
If you're
that's where
someone
I'm
like
at
you and
on
you're out,
Mr. Gabe.
if you're someone like you, Aaron, you're so out in the open about being a Gabe Davis fan, you got to die with it, man. Like you got to go all in with 2 feet, and you definitely have to your credit. So, with Davis himself here, man, like obviously he's had a high ceiling in the past, but he's been really the model of unpredictability, which is not what you want to hear from a production standpoint. So it's kind of a cop out in the industry to say that, oh, I like this player better in best ball than I do in like season long leagues or leagues you have to make decisions in. But if that was ever true about a player, it's got to be Gabe Davis.
Yeah.
Like he has those 4 touchdown weeks where he goes absolutely bananas, and then then he'll go 2 straight weeks without catching a pass. Like it was he's had a really crazy roller coaster type of career to just to get it started. But there's one thing I like about this landing spot, and that's even though he's getting a little bit of a downgrade from Jock going from Allen to Trevor Lawrence. What I like about it here is that in 2023, Trevor Lawrence was through 70 deep passes. That was good for fifth among quarterbacks. And Gabe Davis actually finished first in air yards per reception among wide receivers that caught 40 or more balls in 2023. So kind of put those two things together, like the offense that Lawrence is in, they don't mind throwing the ball deep, and Gabe Davis showed that he can he still has some juice in those deep plays when he does catch the ball. So I think if that continues, Davis could kind of just like you said, stay right where he is from a production standpoint and probably from a value standpoint there as well. But I don't think he's ever going to really fully shed that inconsistent label that's smeared all over him. But he's a guy that you can toss in there, and he at least gives you a shot when you wheel him out into your lineup when you have to. So I guess any final words on Davis before we move on. I know when this guy comes up, I got to give you every opportunity to say what you got to
No,
say.
I like the backsies there. No, it is funny you brought up best ball. I think he does kind of fit that type where obviously, yeah, he's definitely a guy you want on your best ball team. But I really love him as a depth piece too on my fantasy teams where when you start getting buys and you need that depth. And if if you hit, it's just like you throw him in your flex 1 week of an injury or whatever, and that's the perfect type of player you want to blow up, right? That's kind of how I like to build my teams. I think that's why I like him so much, where it kind of just gets the gambling side going, juices going with me, right? But yeah, I guess we'll see. But yeah, I think things are looking up for Gabe, and I think it is really interesting to see if Zay Jones is off the team in 2024. That should even help a little bit more for him.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, that Jacksonville room is there's a lot of bodies in there right now, but I don't think any of them are really elite. So I guess that kind of keeps Davis in the mix, which is good. Let's go to another player who's kind of jumping over to, I guess you could say, a relatively deep pass catching room now. And Jerry Judy finally wears out his welcome in Denver. He gets traded to the Browns for fifth and sixth round draft picks. The Browns actually just extended him as well today. 3 years, $41 million guaranteed. Some incentives based on top two that could really bump him up. I think it's 58 million, as high as the contract could go. But looking at Judy here, obviously he was a top 15 pick back in 2020, and he showed some flashes here and there. He finished 2022 relatively strongly, but all in all, just did not live up to it so far in Denver. Needed to change the scenery badly, but I'm really not convinced he's ever going to live up to that first round pedigree. I will say though, with this move, it's not all bad. I mean, I think no matter what you think of Deshaun Watson, he's the best quarterback Jerry Jeudy has ever played with to this point. So I think it's an upgrade in that regard, regardless of what you think of Watson on the field. Also, it just adds another weapon to this offense, and so in a way, I think that's good for Deshaun Watson. I'm not super convinced that Jerry Jeudy is going to be a big benefactor of this move from a production standpoint. Obviously, Amari Cooper is still in town. David Njoku came on strong at the end of the year with Joe Flacco. Cleveland, they've been the offense itself. They've been in the top 8 in rush attempts every year since Kevin Stefanski has been there. That said, they are bringing in a new offensive coordinator. It's Ken Dorsey coming over from the Bills, who's likely going to throw a lot more than they've seen in the past and has worked with a mobile quarterback in Josh Allen before. So I think they're going to try to get Deshaun Watson. They've really done what they've done their part to get him all the help they can get to improve the offense. So all in all, here I think it's good. Jerry Jeudy is getting out of Denver. He needed to get out of there badly. It just wasn't working out with the Broncos. So he does get a fresh start here with the Browns. And I will say I'm halfway convinced that the reason Ethan was not on the episode tonight is it because he's a big Jerry Jeudy fan. He's been bashing Deshaun Watson's play on the field for a couple years now. So now he has to decide, but oh well, I still love Jeudy. So now do I have to bash him because I don't like Watson, or now do I have to start saying some bad things about Watson, or some good things about Watson now that my boy Jerry Jeudy is on the team? So I think that's why he took the night off tonight.
That could be, yeah, because I know he's been a Judy fan from day one. Yeah, I think this is one where I think if you're looking at it from Dynasty again, I think it's a win, right? Because he gets that 3-year contract, just a little bit of stability there. I mean, that's kind of possibly saying, does he turn into one if, Amari Cooper starts slowing down a little bit over there in Cleveland too. So I think from a dynasty perspective, if you got Judy, it's a win. Um, but I would say like if you're actually I would actually say he's a trade candidate if you're a win now. Just knowing that kind of just target share and kind of he may have some boomer bust weeks as well, but I'd maybe take the hype on him if you can trade him early and maybe try to get an alpha receiver back for it. But on the flip side, he's definitely stash or just a good dynasty asset to have. I think anytime a wide receiver gets a 3-year contract and he's going to be the one or two, I think it's a good thing. So I think that goes for almost every wide receiver for the most part too. So I'm kind of with you. I think he just needs that fresh start. And too bad he wasn't traded to the to the Jags. To prove he's not just just another guy. But I guess we'll definitely see. Does he rejuvenate his career? Can Watson help do that too? That's probably the big story to know is how well does Watson rebound in 2024?
Yeah, we'll see on that. I think from a dynasty lens, I would probably try to. He's a guy I'm probably putting a package together, him and some other pieces. Maybe if I'm a contender, a late first round pick, and trying to upgrade at the position just to try to get some more stability. Because the worst thing you can do is when you want to win, you're like, hey, I'm all in for this year, or I'm about to open a window where I'm going to contend for a couple seasons. Like the worst thing you can do is rely on a guy like this, like Jerry Jeudy, based on the performance he's given us thus far, where I'm actually willing to pay more on top to get him off of my team if I can get a solid producer for a couple years in return. So I think that's probably the move with Judy. If you can't get that deal done, then yeah, you just hold on to him and you hope that he takes a jump and figures it out. And if not, he'll end up just being a roster clogger for you for the next few years. So I'm pretty low on Jerry Judy. He's had his opportunity. He hasn't shown it. So until
He's dead to you
otherwise,
now.
until yeah, don't let Ethan hear this, but until he actually shows it on the field and produces, because fantasy is a results oriented game. I need to see more, so I'm up on him for now. But let's go to a guy who I know you're going to be in on now that he's wearing a Kansas City Chiefs helmet out there, and that's Marquise Hollywood Brown ending up with the Chiefs on a 1-year, $7 million contract. Unlike my New England Patriots, who we talked about earlier, who are terrible and refuse to spend money to get better, your team just won the Super Bowl for the second consecutive year, and they're still adding pieces to give Mahomes more to work with here. So they added some serious speed to this offense with Brown. Aaron, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, this is another one where it's interesting. It's almost similar to my Ridley take where I think Hollywood's a very talented wide receiver, but my mind actually goes right back to Mahomes. Like, oh man, like watch out. Mahomes may come back with 2024 with like a 50 touchdown year again. Kind of had that, that slump year last year is as far as what was expected from him from a fantasy landscape, I should say. So Hollywood, kind of looking at him as that MBS replacement as we've been talking about. Um, yeah, I think he's definitely has talent. I think what the Chiefs have shown the last couple of years is, on those 1 year deals, it could be one and done, and they could maybe go after another rookie wide receiver in this draft as well. So you never know if he's just like a position filler. He definitely fits Andy Reid's scheme, though. I do like that. Kind of reminds me, I guess I can maybe comp him right now to like a Jerry Macklin as well. Kind of one of Reed's favorites too. So I think I like the move for sure. On the fantasy side, I think actually it kind of helps Rice's value. I think one thing I was looking at, kind of hesitant on Rice's value was, well, what are the Chiefs going to do? Are they going to go real big and try to get a star wide receiver opposed to Rice? But I think Hollywood's just a nice complement to the offense, so I don't think it really should scare Rice owners either. So I think it's just a complement to the offense. Should help Mahomes as well. And I'm not overly excited to have him Hollywood on my team, but I think he'll still have a pretty good season. 1,000+ yards, 6, 7 touchdowns.
It's hard for me to criticize a team that just won back-to-back Super Bowls, but watching them offensively the last year, I mean, you could tell they kind of needed another piece. Like, obviously Mahomes is great; he's gonna get all the credit, but I think this Washington Aaron, like the defense really carried Kansas City in 2023.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, like they were lights out, man. Like just making big plays, even at the end. Kind of holding the Niners out, just holding them to a field goal so Mahomes could go win it at the end, doing their job on that side. So I like what they're doing here at adding Brown. I think he, like you said, he complements them well. I think the fit here is really good because he can run downfield. Like he's a threat that defenses have to honor with all that speed that he has, and I think that works out really well for Kelsey, who likes to work in the short and intermediate areas of the field, and guys like Rashee Rice, who you know this too, Aaron, from watching like they were afraid to throw Rashee Rice the ball in even like the intermediate areas. Definitely like forget
Right.
about deep, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think we looked at yards in the air, and Rice Rice was definitely not leading that category, right? He was making nice quick plays, and his yards after catch was nice, but yeah, this definitely opens the field up a lot more, adding Brown.
Yeah, totally agree. And so it's a good fit all around. I think it helps Rice. I think it helps Kelsey extend his window for another year. And I think him joining a high scoring offense, Brown himself, is that's going to be good for him as well. So, and I think the biggest winner here is you Kansas City fans who don't have to watch Valdez Scantling or Justin Watson drop the ball when Mahomes puts it on a dime going deep downfield.
Right.
But we got two more receivers to talk about here. So let's go to a guy who he kind of popped a little bit a few years ago and has been quiet ever since. That's Darnell Mooney signing a 3-year, $39 million contract with the Atlanta Falcons. And for me here, man, like talk about an overpay for a guy who I know he had that one random one-off 1,000-yard season a few years ago, but the rest of his career really has been unmemorable. And I know a lot of that's not his fault. Didn't have phenomenal quarterback play or offensive systems. He had to learn a few of them in his time in Chicago, which makes it hard. Suffered through some injuries as well too. So a mixed bag with Mooney here. It's just a guy that's not really I'm not really overly high on. Outside the 1,000 year, he's yet to exceed 650 yards in a single season, and he's never scored more than 4 touchdowns in a year. Last season, Pro Football Focus had him ranked as the 107th wide receiver overall. So nothing to write home about there. Slots in as the third option in Atlanta behind Drake London and Kyle Pitts. I will say that Kirk Cousins does represent an upgrade at quarterback, to be sure. But I think his upside to me is a WR3, and I'm not even convinced he's going to get there. I think I'd have him ranked more as a WR4 for 2024. He's not someone that I'm really all that interested in. I think if you want Mooney, the move is to kind of put a package together where it's like two pieces coming out, three coming your way, or vice versa, and he's kind of involved in that package one way or another. Someone I don't really love taking flyers on third options like for guys that are now 5 years into their career. Uh, Studies show that if you pop, you do it in your first 4 years. And Mooney's got one decent season under his belt, but I think when we look back at his career, that's going to be the outlier compared to the rest of his statistical output going forward. So those are my quick thoughts on Mooney. Are you with me on this, or are you going the other way?
This is funny. This might be our one. We have a little split decision here. I guess I'd say. It's funny. Ethan is another Mooney fan as well, and it's funny. We probably went. I don't know how many trades in a league that we have. We either we threw Mooney's name in a trade a lot and often. But this is one I wrote down where I kind of like it. I like this spot, this landing spot with Mooney. If it does hold true to being London Mooney, Rondell Moore, and Pitts as a wide receiver core. Um, I do agree with your part. Thinking Mooney's a buy now piece, try to just squeak him in a trade, right? Like he probably doesn't have that much value. And if you're working on deals, he's a perfect piece to just try to have somebody just sneak him in there, right? Where because I think he is a good candidate where he may outperform his value because his value is pretty low right now overall. You know, Cousins is definitely an upgrade from from the Chicago offense, and being just the number two over there. I definitely think Mooney can have a couple nice weeks. Maybe think of him just coming off the bench for you, stash him a little bit, but I think he may pay dividends as far as value. And if you got to throw him in the lineup next year, I think he may have a couple decent weeks.
So every now and again, you get guys that are sort of middle career, later career guys that kind of figure it out and they're fantasy viable. Those things do happen, but for the most part, like if you don't pan out or very early in your career and then kind of sustain that, then you really don't usually make it. So that's kind of more so why I'm down on guys like Jerry Judy or guys like Darnell Mooney who haven't shown it in a few years. Like ultimately these guys usually end up just kind of being guys that you have on your roster that you're kind of like, yeah, in a pinch, maybe I could kind of feel halfway decent about putting them in there, but they're just not guys that I want to go out of my way to target. Like I'd rather just take shots in the draft at guys who I think have a little bit more upside, who land in a better situation, etc. So, um, but anyway, 3 years, 39 million, like that's good, a good chunk of change for Mooney, like good for him and all that. But I think the Falcons definitely overpaid for his services there for sure. But let's get going here. We got our last wide receiver to cover. This is a guy who has popped in the past. And I know that we talked earlier about Gabe Davis kind of being that ultimate best ball weapon, but I think Mike Williams, who signed a 1 year deal up to $15 million with the New York Jets, I think Williams is also a good guy to fit that mold of a good best ball player. Um, so I guess I'll let you start here. What do you think about Big Mike catching down with the Jets on a 1 year ride?
That's hilarious because I just wrote down one thing and I actually wrote down Gabe Davis as well. So you kind of hit it on the head there. Um, I think I look at this signing with the Jets again, just trying to go, trying to go, I guess, try number two with Aaron Rodgers and giving him weapons. I think him and Garrett Wilson actually will be a pretty nice deep threat, red zone threats. I think Rodgers will definitely be able to find one of the two of them in the end zone for sure. So I don't mind this signing. He might just be a nice, just almost goes along with same theme, like just same theme where you might just need to rely on coming off your bench for you. Hopefully, he comes out with a touchdown. Kind of that boomer bust player, as you said. But I do think he fits, and I think Aaron Rodgers will actually like having him on the team and to throw to. So I don't mind the signing, but I think it's the exact same, description how you what you already said. Boomer bust player, kind of a Gabe Davis type. He could come down with 3 touchdowns and even like just 20 yards, even right too. So,
Yep.
um, yeah, that's kind of my thought on Mike Williams over his signing.
Yeah, he really is a lot like Gabe Davis, except he's a little bit older, and he is more injury prone. Yeah, it's definitely not a sexy dynasty asset at any point. That ship's definitely sailed on Williams. I do think he can give you that boomer bust play though, like you said, and I think what he does in 2024 is really dependent on how Aaron Rodgers bounces back from that torn Achilles. I think if he can help that offense kind of just be more efficient, be better, and higher scoring, then I think Williams himself he could when he's on the field. He could have TD upside from week to week. You never know. And obviously, Garrett Wilson can do a little bit of everything on the other side. So Williams definitely will have the coverage taken away from him, which is good. So I think overall, this is probably about as good of a landing spot as you could have hoped for Mike Williams at this stage. And he really is now in a spot where it's kind of like, hey, Mike, like you're 30 years old, you're never on the field and available. So it's you got to kind of put up or shut up this year. So I do think his NFL future very much is on the line in 24. So who knows? Maybe that's the boost he needs to get back on the field, but and produce. But as far as the dynasty asset, like I said, that he's never going to be that ever again based on his track record and his age. But if you're a contender and you're hanging on to him, I wouldn't just be moving on from him a third. I'd probably just keep hang on to him and gamble that maybe he gives me 1 or 2 weeks of viability at the right time and go from there. But we do have one last player to discuss here, and that's Gerald Everett, the only tight end we're going to talk about. And he signs with the Bears 2 years, $12 million. And I bring him up not so much to talk about Gerald Everett, but more so to talk about the Bears tight end room in general here. Everett himself, he's been somewhat fantasy viable over the last couple seasons out there in LA. He lands in Chicago, and the team, their new offensive coordinator is Shane Waldron, who's coming over from the Seattle Seahawks, where he was their offensive coordinator. And in 3 years in Seattle, the tight end room for a fantasy standpoint was a complete crapshoot at best. In half PPR scoring formats, the team did not have a top 17 tight end in each of the last 3 years. So that's pretty bad. I've kind of been cursing his name since he's been ruining my boy Noah Fant ever since he landed out in Seattle. And so Van
Preach
actually
on
stuck
that.
around in Seattle, but Waldron is now gone. So we'll see how that goes for them. But I think this isn't necessarily a great thing for Cole Kmet, who now has DJ Moore and Keenan Allen to compete with too. So kind of indicating more they want the offense to move through the air through the wide receivers. And you tack all that on with a rookie quarterback coming into play too. So I don't think this move is good for Everett. I don't think it's a good move for Cole Kmet. And I'm not panic selling on Komet because he is so young, but just in general, I just don't think this is a great move for either guy here. So I guess what's your take on that on the Bears tight end room?
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think like Komet, if you had him in 23, you loved him, right? He was top 10. What was his tight end finish? He tied top 10, right?
Yeah, man, you're right on it. He was tight end 7 last year in half PPR formats.
Yeah, so top seven tight end. I think he did come down with a couple weeks where he was like pretty much the target man, right? Where I do agree with you. I think with Everett being there, I think he's gonna take away a little bit of targets, but it's really like Everett and then now Keenan Allen, right? Like if you're a young quarterback, you're gonna probably be hogging them all to Allen or more. You may I don't know if you're gonna go down your third or fourth check down, or is Caleb then gonna just try to run outside the pocket then throw it away? Does he find the tight end at that point? I don't know if it's gonna be the exact same dynamic as what Fields had with Komet as either Moore or Komet, but now I think you're throwing in like three or four or five different outcomes that can happen each play where does Komet slightly drop. I as you said, I do like Komet a lot. But is he gonna come down with those consistent weeks from a year ago? Once again, it goes back to that rookie quarterback conversation. So yeah, maybe a little bit of a hit on Komet's value. I agree with that.
Yeah, and I like Noah Fant a lot too. And then he ended up with Shane Waldron and two other jaggy tight ends that ruined his fantasy value. So I'm going to be staying away from Komet in 2024, but hopefully for his sake, I'm wrong about that and he can continue the viability. But that's going to put a pin in our discussion around free agencies. It's been a really fun couple weeks to recap all that. It's been good stuff, and I think we're going to be getting more into the dynasty rookie conversation. Kind of as the weeks progress here, the NFL draft is just 6 weeks away. So make sure you're doing your homework. Make sure you're following us on all of our social media channels. We're on X at Sunday_Surefire, Instagram at Sunday Surefire, and check us out on Facebook too, Sunday Surefire. And until the next time, folks, peace.